This week in Arsenal, Benjamin Šeško decides to stay at RB Leipzig. The media once again goes after Bukayo Saka. Manchester City's suit against the Premier League begins, and the players get ready for the Euros. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 60. It is June 11th, 2024, and as always, I am Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale, and back with us after a 2-week vacation is the man, the myth, the legend, Sash, who you can follow on Twitter at LT Arsenal. Sash, how you doing, my friend? How's the trip?
Yeah, it was really good. So, quite a lot of traveling, to be honest. So, I went to Copenhagen first, followed by Hamburg and Berlin, and then Paris. So, been traveling a bit over the last couple of weeks. So, it's really nice to see a lot of places, but also, I think, quite tiring. And even whilst I was traveling, I did miss a lot following Arsenal, following the transfer window, and missed being part of this podcast also for the last couple of weeks. So, it's really great to be back and can't wait to get into the grind again. But Sham, how are you? Hope all's good with you too.
Yeah, everything's good. I had a weekend at the beach, took a day off from work last week, and it was very relaxing. I came back very rejuvenated after just hanging out with a couple of dear friends and taking it easy. So yeah, good to be back. Glad to have you back with us, and looking forward to talk about the things that we're going to talk about today. And um, there's been a lot going on. It's one of those weird times of the year where it feels like there's a lot going on and nothing going on at the exact same time. So there are several things for us to discuss, and one of those is the ongoing Manchester City lawsuit against the Premier League, which news of this broke, I think, last week at this point, and the proceedings themselves actually began yesterday. So those reportedly are going to go on for a couple weeks, and then we will probably pretty quickly hear about the result of those and the impact that they will have on the larger, 115 charges related suit. But just kind of for background, um, the Financial Times, I believe it was, reported that Manchester City had brought a lawsuit against the Premier League, alleging that the Premier League was not only discriminating against owners from the Gulf nations, such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but also that these financial rules that City are enacting. Sorry, not City. That the Premier League are enacting, right? That state that sponsors cannot be linked to club owners are wrong, right? That they shouldn't be. That they shouldn't be legal. They shouldn't be the law. That cities should be able effectively to kind of do whatever they want with their sponsorships. So um, that's currently what they're contesting, and also, City are kind of raising issue with the fact that currently the way that the Premier League is set up, you need a 2/3 majority vote from the other Premier League clubs in order to pass new guidelines or new rules. And City have referred to this as quote unquote the tyranny of the majority, which is never a good sign when the argument you are making is basically that you don't like what the majority of the people around you think if it's different to what you think. That's what we in the business call anti-democracy. So, Sash, I just kind of want to get your thoughts, on the On just kind of like the nature of specifically of the sponsorship thing, right? Like, what do you think of this idea that Manchester City are essentially trying to talk the Premier League into letting them do whatever they want with their sponsorships?
Look, there's two sides to this, okay? One thing is what's already happened. And look, we all know that a lot of Man City's 115 charges had to do with their sponsorship revenues, right? Like it's pretty like not like accounted for properly all the time. So that's I guess basically the crux of what the issue is. Now, if they're going to make an argument that, hey, let us have sponsorships from anywhere, that could be something for the Premier League to consider for the future. I think it's still really silly to just inflate sponsorship revenues just like that, just so you can like comply with the profit and sustainability rules. But still, let's say that's what City want to do, which is inflate their sponsorship revenues, or they want to like have access to like sponsorship revenues from anywhere in the future. That's something that yeah they can sit and discuss with the Premier League. That's something for the future, but that should not take away from what they have done in the past, right? And the accusations or the allegations that the Premier League has against them is that yeah they've inflated their sponsorship revenues and it's not been accounted for properly. They've not been providing like the proofs that the Premier League's asked for properly. So that's the issue at hand. And if they're found guilty, they need to absolutely be penalized for it because I'm just looking at it from the point of view again as an Arsenal fan and also as a fan of teams that I'm always a fan of teams that try to do things organically. Like Liverpool, their fans are annoying, but I still really admire what Jurgen Klopp has done at that club, doing things organically. What benefit do these teams have that have actually complied with the rules over the last 10, 12 years? Because City have clearly got an advantage over all of these teams. So they absolutely need to be punished for what they've done. And look, there's a lot of discussion. Oh, are they guilty? Are they not guilty? I think it's pretty clear. Like, just as an outsider who's maybe not an expert in accounting, I think it's pretty clear what has gone on. I think the whole world knows what has gone on. And the Premier League is not going to sit and put 115 charges for no reason, right? There's obviously something in it. So City's arguments seem pretty ridiculous to me. And the fact that, yeah, they're trying to, file a case against the Premier League and it's just trying to, I guess, delay the inevitable. But Sham, I guess you will know a lot more on this because since you're a lawyer, you know the intricacies of how these things like function. I'm only able to give you like a outsider or a football fan's perspective of this, but I guess you will be able to give us a more professional angle on this. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying I don't practice in the UK, and I'm not um, kind of an expert on kind of the law that goes with football clubs and things of that nature, but kind of speaking on general experience in the legal field. Um, well, first of all, right, basically what City are doing here is in the overall case, the one that City has brought, the basically alleging these 115 breaches of financial rules, City are attempting to argue that they are not guilty of those rules, right? Which is fine. That's kind of what you're going to do if you're in that situation. But now they're saying even if we are guilty, these rules should not be a thing, right? Which is it's lawyers being good lawyers and making multiple arguments and coming up with multiple reasons why their client should be found not guilty or should be acquitted. But it is very indicative of how they view the situation, of kind of how comfortable they're feeling at the moment, and it's a really scary thing to try to make a precedent in the Premier League, right? Because basically what they're doing here is the Premier League has come out and said for at least some of these financial breaches, what City have done is cooked the books in a way that involves having sponsors linked to their owner pump money into the club and give them an unfair financial advantage. And so now we have these new rules coming in basically saying that you can't have owner linked sponsorships to a certain level. So now City are arguing that, this isn't exactly what they're saying, but just for example, right? They're arguing that Etihad Airways should be able to give them 500 million pounds a year, and that's fine, right? Even though that's linked to the UAE government, that maybe a company headed up by one of Sheikh Mansour's buddies or a family member, right, can inject a bunch of money into City, and that's fine, right? And so, like, kind of an example I have on our end, right, is Stan Kroenke. His wife is an heiress to the Walmart fortune, right? For those of you who don't know, Walmart is basically the biggest, um, biggest set chain of stores in the United States, right? It's like Walmart and Target. You walk in there, you can get everything from groceries to yoga pants to a flat screen TV and everything in between. So that's like if Arsenal suddenly had Walmart do a 200 million pound a year sponsorship deal with them, right? That would be a little suspicious. That would be a little unfair. So it's really City just trying to rig the game in their benefit, and I would say just look at the clubs who have kind of lined up in support of them, right? You have Newcastle United, owned by the Saudi government, probably looking to do the same thing, and definitely upset that just as they're kind of coming into this game, right? Just as the owners are starting to dip a toe in the pool, suddenly the financial rules are different, right? So they're probably mad about that. Chelsea, we're talking about a team that was allegedly basically funded by Putin at one point while Abramovich was in charge.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the team that spent £1 billion on new players in the course of a year outside of whatever salaries they're giving them. So these are probably guys who are running afoul of the PSR rules. And then you have Everton, who got docked points twice by the Premier League this past season, and now, according to the BBC, uh, have received a bid for the club worth £400 million. And one of the people in the consortium making this bid is a member of the Saudi royal family, right?
Wow.
So Everton is trying to be next up in this line, and then I think Aston Villa also is in support of City, and this is a team that's right now having to sell Douglas Luiz in order to apparently comply with PSR requirements. Um, uh, why am I forgetting the name of the Aston Villa owner? He's an Egyptian businessman, but the owner of Aston Villa is coming out and basically complaining about PSR, saying that they're non-competitive rules. He's talking about moving the headquarters of his company to Abu Dhabi. So Villa are also trying to kind of skirt these requirements a bit. So it's all very indicative of what these teams want to do, and kind of uh, how PSR and how current financial restrictions get in the way of them basically just cooking the books however they want, spending money however they want, and gaining an unfair advantage, at least
Mhm.
financially, on other teams in the league. So it's really interesting to see what's happening. But I mean, do you get a different sense? Do you think City are going to get away with it here, or do you think maybe this indicates that maybe they think they're in bigger trouble than what they're letting on?
Yeah, I think it's really tough one, to be honest, for me to sit here and say what might or might not happen without being too much of a legal person. But I think one thing is pretty clear: the fact that City are getting defensive already and trying to put it back on the Premier League shows that they are a bit afraid here. And yeah, the Premier League also, we were speaking before the show about how much they have spent in defense fees. You were telling me that I think they spent what, 30 million
30 million
pounds or something.
pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot, And I think you also mentioned that normally these fees are in single digits, but the fact that it's so high tells you that the Premier League is also holding its ground. And I think it's quite complex also it'll be interesting to see if the UK government gets involved, because obviously they have a close relationship with UAE. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. I don't see them getting a free pass or something, though I do see a punishment happening. Because look, I'm not condoning what Nottingham Forest and Everton did, but if you look at the scale of what City are being accused of, it's on a different planet, and I think it will be a good example for the Premier League to, get City in trouble and show that, hey, you guys have to comply or this is what will happen to you. And yeah, I'm telling you again, whatever City have done in these last few years, it is tainted by the what is clearly on top of them, which is this 115 charges. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think they will be punished. I expect that the laws will be properly enforced, and whoever the judges will make the appropriate decision to penalize City for what they've done all these years. Um, but yeah, that's all I can hope for. Like, I think in the past, City have also like been caught guilty of something, but I think they escaped because, if I'm not mistaken, the duration had already elapsed or something for the law that they broke, something on those lines, I think. And I think it was referred to the uh, CAS committee as well,
Hmm.
and they got away with it, but not because they were found not guilty, but I think only because that legislation was not already enforced, something on those lines. So they basically got off on a technicality, but I don't think that's going to be the case now. And yeah, I think it's fire for fire. City have powerful lawyers. The Premier League also have powerful lawyers. So let's just hope that justice is served for all the teams that actually complied with the rules all these years, including Arsenal. So it'll be interesting to see. But Sham, what are your thoughts on this? Like, I know you told me before the show started that you think City could be in trouble, but when do you think that we would have more clarity by?
Yeah. So we'll definitely have more clarity on the situation when the hearings are over, which I think is probably in about 2 weeks' time. Um,
This is for
yeah.
the defense. So this is for the defense case that the Premier League is fighting, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
the
So
case that City filed with the Premier League.
this is for City's suit against the Premier League, basically saying that it's discrimination, these new rules, and that they want to be able to have state linked or owner linked sponsors, and also kind of trying to fight back against the way that current Premier League voting rules are set up. Um, in terms of what I think, I don't think this is something that you do if you're confident that you're going to win
Hmm.
the other case at the end of the year. Because again, these are kind of slightly contradictory arguments the City are making. Um, Later in the year, they're going to say that they didn't break these laws or these rules, and then right now, they're saying even if we did, these shouldn't be rules.
They should be
Um,
changed, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, these rules should be changed. They shouldn't be in effect. And it's a very common tactic. Basically what they're doing here is they're trying to bury City, or sorry, they're trying to bury the Premier League in lawsuits, in paperwork. They're trying to, make them make a decision on where they decide to put their very finite resources. Because now, the Premier League are dealing with two different cases, and
Hmm.
they're going to have to hire lawyers for both those cases. And there's going to be hearings, and there's going to be filings, and there's going to be research that they need to do. That really does stack up in terms of the
Hmm.
amount of money that they have to pay. For a City, basically an endless budget in that regard. For the Premier League, I'm sure it's not. So yeah, they're basically trying to financially bully the Premier League into letting them have their way. So yeah, I think City are worried, and I think the Premier League are probably hitting a point where they see the monster that they've created by allowing this to go on as long as it has.
Hmm.
Because if City win this, right, then it's a huge blow at the end of the month, because now we're kind of entering those proceedings under the impression that the sponsorship rules they've run afoul of are illegitimate, right? Or so that's a big problem for the Premier League. It probably means that City will win that case at the end of the month, at the end of the year as well. And then you're just going to have the Premier League kind of being powerless, right? Maybe there's a hit to the 2/3 voting rule. The Premier League
Mm-hmm.
can't really make any new laws affecting sponsorships. And then what's going to happen is City are just going to keep on winning Premier Leagues because they can go and spend a billion, £2 billion
Yeah,
on players,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they have untold amounts of money coming in through sponsorships that are probably actually coming from other sources,
yeah.
and they're just marking them on the books as sponsorships, and it's going to maybe permanently kind of kneecap the Premier League in terms of its competitiveness, in terms of its excitement, its watchability, and yeah, I think the league is really understanding that this is a do or die moment for them. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I think anything outside of geopolitical involvement from the UK government and the UAE government um, I think that's probably the only thing that is going to prevent City from facing some level of consequences here. The
Mm-hmm.
extent, I can't really say, but I think the Premier League do understand that they have to make an example of City here, and if they don't, then it's curtains in terms of the
Yeah.
level of control they have over the teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Pep's contract expires at the end of the coming season, right? So from 2025, his contract expires. And I think the fact that he's not yet signed the extension, of course, it's always rumors, or he could leave, or he might sign. You always hear conflicting stuff. But I think the fact that he himself has not signed the extension, I think he's also waiting to get some more clarity on what the outcome of this case is going to be. And also, one thing that really annoys me is Pep is like, oh, look at how much we spend in the last few seasons. Look at this, look at our net spend, look at the others. What he fails to ignore is what he inherited. He inherited a really good team at Man City. People forget that, that team had won a league title just a couple of seasons before he arrived. Like, City were really good, and they were really good because of how much they spent. They spent an obscene amount of money. Like, I remember also in the first a few seasons when they were making that jump, to becoming the club that they were. That just look at the number of strikers they had. I was like, wow, how is this even possible? Like Robinho, Tevez, Rocky Santa Cruz, Craig Bellamy. They signed Jacko. Like they always
Yeah.
had like 4 or 5 strikers. They had Benjani as well. If OGs in the Premier League would know who Benjani is, but they had all of these guys
Oh
at one
yeah,
point.
I do remember they signed Benjani. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
yeah.
weird one for me.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
what I mean, there's a story behind that signing also. So Benjani didn't want to leave Portsmouth, but Harry Redknapp was like, oh, he got 13 million. So he was basically forced out of the club, and he hardly ever kicked a ball for City.
yeah.
But the point is, yeah, City used to stack their team with all these players, and that was only possible because of the amount of money that they were able to spend back in the day. So this is
Yeah.
something, yeah, that people seem to forget, and I think you should not forget this because like that's the foundation for what they are today. Without that, they are not the club that they are today. So
Well,
people
just
forget that. Pep himself forgets that. That's
well,
quite
just
annoying.
look at like their current team, right? You have £100 million left winger who is just kind of a mascot for the team at this point. You
Yeah,
you have I think like an £80 million left back who took the better part of the season to really acclimate to the league, and they managed to deal with it. Um, there, let's see, there's another player I was thinking of, and I'm forgetting it now, but City base. Oh, Calvin Phillips. The amount of money they
yeah,
spent on Calvin Phillips, and then he just was a complete bust. Oh, and also Matthias Nunez, right?
yeah,
They
yeah,
spent big
exactly. He
money on.
doesn't even start. He doesn't even start. Whereas a team like Arsenal, when Havertz goes a couple of months without doing something, you're like, oh, 65 million, look at this. But City, nobody says stuff like that,
Yeah,
They're just allowed to.
because they have more of those players who are willing to carry the load and can just come in and save the day, right? And
Hmm.
so, net spend is great and all that, but what's the
Yeah,
base spend I think is more indicative of how
yeah,
they're able to abuse these rules. And you mentioned Guardiola leaving at the end of next season. It's not just him, right? You have Kevin De Bruyne publicly flirting with a move to Saudi. You have Erling Haaland kind of being a little dodgy about whether or not he'll sign an extension. Omar Barada left City to go join United, last season. Their head of women's football, Nils Nielsen, left City after one single year there. So they're I don't want to. I think it's more of a correlation thing than anything. I don't want to come to a concrete conclusion, but in the event City were to face serious consequences for what they're doing, you could say that all those guys are jumping ship because they know
yeah,
something's coming.
100%, hundred
Yeah,
percent. No doubt about that. And that's what it'll be also interesting to see the number of players from City who are going to sign contract extensions in the coming months. I'm really interested to see because as of now, we didn't see too many like reports of some City players signing a contract extension. I only see their players getting linked with moves away. So yeah, I think it's one to really keep an eye on. And yeah, as I mentioned, hopefully justice is served and we can get a conclusion pretty soon because this has gone on for long enough. The case came out last season, I think around Feb last year. That's when I think the case first came out. It's already been well over a year. City have won another title. And again, even the titles they win, if they were legitimate, if they were totally legitimate, I think everyone would be heaping praise on City. But the fact that there's always this dark cloud hanging over their heads, I think, yeah, I think for their own good, also, it's good if they get closure soon. So
yeah.
let's hope that
And
that happens soon.
Yeah, before we move on, I just kind of want to hammer home the point of what it does to us because I'm sure we've got about 4,000 people watching right now, so I'm sure there's some of you who are kind of thinking to yourselves, how does this affect us? Why are we talking about City? It's not this week in Manchester City; it's this week in Arsenal.
Hmm.
But you know, the problem is if City get their way, again, they can just come up with endless amounts of money out of bogus sponsorships. They can basically have either the owner of Manchester City or his family members or his friends funnel them money through sponsorships that are linked to the club through companies that are owned by these people. And so without any limits, we're going to be going up against Manchester City that could spend 9, 10 figures on players every single year, and I'm talking high nine figures every single year. We don't operate like that. We have a much larger, or sorry, much smaller margin for error at this point in time, and so we've already had to be so smart just to finish second against these guys twice in a row. We've had to nail Ben White and Martin Odegaard and David Raya and Gabriel and Declan Rice and Kai Havertz and Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko are kind of iffy signings at this point, and that might have been the difference. So um, if City get their way, then there's just no competing with them at that point, and we're just going to be the Dortmund to their Bayern for a few years, and then we'll probably drop off at the end of that cycle, and someone else will be the new English Dortmund. So yeah, it really is kind of the fate of the competitiveness of the Premier League that we love to pride ourselves on really does hang in the balance over the next several months. So yeah, it's massively important.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, despite you saying that we could be the English Dortmund, I think that we still have to try and compete with them on the pitch. So obviously, as fans or even as players in that team, obviously it's a big injustice that's happening. But I also think that we have to try to beat them on the pitch. I think
Yeah,
we have to separate the two. We can be frustrated with what's happened, but on the other hand, we also want to compete with them on the pitch and try to get one over them, prevent them from winning 5 league titles in a row and put an end to it and send Pep off on a low. That's what our aim should be
yeah,
this season. And to obviously do that, we need to make the right transfers. We need to make the right moves in this summer transfer window, which has been pretty quiet so far. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the lack of noise this window? Because usually, like in the last couple of windows, obviously last year we heard a lot about Declan Rice for a long time. It was pretty obvious that he was a top target. By now, Kai Havertz's name had also popped up. Whereas this summer, it seems to be a lot quieter, right? There, there seems to be some murmurs around. Okay, we might be interested in Sesko, but it's also not super concrete the way Declan Rice was. This guy is the number one target, and we're going to do everything we in our power to get him. So why do you think that there has been such less activity, not activity, but rather transfer rumors this summer in terms of like concrete news? Why do you think that's the case? Do you think it's a case of Arteta and Arsenal like putting an end to the leaks and really controlling what information goes where? Or do you think the club has just not woken up yet? Like, what are your thoughts on the window so far?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's pretty clear at this point that no one really knows what Arsenal's up to, right? You've always had certain people posing as fake ITKs and not really having a clue what's going on, but now even people with track records are getting it wrong, right? Now people who've even like just had a couple hits here and there are batting 0% currently, and the Sheshko thing. I think Fabrizio Romano reported today that Sheshko is actually going to stay at RB Leipzig, right? He's gonna take the pay increase there, the contract extension. He's gonna be the golden boy over there now, and take maybe the extra season or two to develop. And wh- I think if we really wanted Sheshko, we would have wrapped that up already.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
not we're a pretty hard club to say no to these days. Um, we're challenging for the Premier League. We're back in the Champions League. We are, one of the biggest cities in the world. We can offer a pretty competitive pay package. So if we wanted him, we would have gotten him. I think the difference between last year and this year is that Declan Rice was like the guy, right? It's not often that there's only one option in a position. Normally, there's tiers of players that you're interested in. There's multiple players of the same profile that you can go after, and if you miss out on one but get the other, that's completely fine, right? Um, when Edu and Arteta and Richard Garlick and the others are talking this out, they're not getting super attached to one name normally, right? Declan Rice was the exception, right? Declan Rice was the guy that they wanted. He was the 6'8" hybrid player who was just a transition stopping master, and who you had the likes of Bayern Munich interested, but more importantly, you had Manchester City interested in him, right? So I think it was one of those things where we did all that legwork. We talked to him for months. We paid 105 million pounds. Shattered our transfer record for him because we knew that not only was he probably the only player on the market who could do what we needed, but if we didn't sign him, he was probably going to go to City, and then you know how are we going to compete with that? So Rice really was a do or die signing. That had to happen if we wanted to have any chance of competing with City. This time around, I think. Well, I'll put it to you like this: is there a player on the market who is just far and away outside of like crazy like Vinny or Mbappe guys, right? Like, is there any attainable player on the market right now who just really grabs you and you think to yourself, we have to have him?
Yeah, I think the word you used, a very important word there, which was attainable, because someone like a Victor Osimhen is obviously really unique. I think he stands out a bit to some of the others in that center forward department. It may be someone like Rafael Leao really stands out when it comes to like the wide forwards. But how attainable are they? I'm not so sure, because obviously Rafael Leao is not going to come on the cheap. These are all players who are going to cost like 120 million and upwards. Like, I don't see either of those teams like selling for anything less. Like Italian teams would never pay us what we want, but when it comes to getting money for their players, they really can be a pain in the ass. So yeah, I think it's not going to be easy for us to get either of those two names. So in terms of who is attainable, and for me, a player who's attainable is probably someone that costs lesser than 100 million and also might want to come to Arsenal. Like Bruno G is really good, but
Hmm.
I don't think that he's the only player in that position. I think he would be my top pick for sure, but he's not the only one out there. Like you've seen, we are linked to like João Neves, also, for example, who could play that role. So I think there are good options for the positions that we would be looking at, who are also attainable. So yeah, as you mentioned, I think it's important for us to yeah, be flexible and not get attached to one target, because in the past Arsenal always got attached to one player and usually during the window it would be a long drawn out saga and then we'd end up with no one. So yeah, I think it's good that the club is being proactive, identify 2 3 players who fit the game model and then take it from there, because transfer windows always give you opportunities. For example, a player's valuation might not be the same at the start of the window as it is towards the end of the window. It's always a set of like moving parts, and I'm pretty sure that Arsenal are waiting for the right time to pounce on their opportunity. Obviously, Mikel Arteta would love for the players to be brought in by the time preseason starts, but sometimes it's important to get the right player and the best deal as opposed to just hurriedly doing something because it's convenient to do so. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I think there's no players on the market that we need, right? Obviously, we do need to address a couple areas in the team, but guys like Osimhen and Liao and Bruno Guimaraes, as good as they are, they have a couple flaws that maybe make us think, if we have to pay 9 digits for them, is that worth it, right? Um, Osman, I feel like, is someone that we could wait on a little bit in this window and maybe come back and see if we can pay below that
Hmm.
103 million pound release clause that he has, and see if we can talk Napoli into it. Because apparently there's rumors Antonio Conte, who Napoli just hired as the new manager, wants to bring in Lukaku, right? So interesting choice, but if that's what he wants to do, then that's fine. But yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. There just isn't really anyone that we absolutely have to get to. So I think we're more than content to bide our time, wait for some of the dominoes to fall in the market, and pounce when an opening arises. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really understand about how the transfer market works, right? A lot of these deals come together very quickly, right? A lot of the time it's about, a player in Italy who went to a team in Germany, and then the Italian team decides to go, sign a player from another team, and then that opens us up to go get a team or a player from a third team, right?
Hmm.
It's all, an interconnected puzzle that we're just kind of waiting for the pieces to kind of come together. And yeah, we'll see. I think we have pretty long list of players who'd be interested in, and it's just a matter of getting value, because again, you can't go spending 100 million pounds on some player who doesn't pan out.
100%, 100%. It's just about being calm and getting the right players in, making sure that you get all the players that you want, at least the positions that you want. And yeah, let's see what happens. I'm sure some players might not even be on Arsenal's list, but suddenly during the window they become available. So like yesterday we saw like Delict. I think he's a player that Arsenal might go for. Like I said this back in May, something about his profile makes me think that we would go for him. We obviously want a centre back, and the fact that he's 24, has a lot of experience, he's a leader. Something about that just makes me think that we will go for him. But let's see what happens. So I guess it's always moving parts, and yeah, I'm not surprised that there have not been that many murmurings. Like obviously, last June there was no like international tournament, right? Like there was nothing. So I think it was simpler. But when the Euros is there, I think a lot of players also want to decide their futures after the tournament is over. And yeah, I think we have to just wait for after July 1st to start seeing proper movement. So let's see what happens. But on that note, I also want to say that it's important for us not just to strengthen from outside, but also look to promote from within. And we obviously have Ethan Nwaneri. I think he's expected to play a part in preseason. Arteta obviously really rates him, and I think the club will start to integrate him into the first team this season. Might not obviously be a starter, but I think will still be very useful as a squad player. And I think the preseason would be a good time for him to integrate into the team. But unfortunately, not all youth players are like Ethan Wanieri. There are some players who obviously have left Arsenal, gone elsewhere, and we just had the news a couple of days ago or yesterday that Chido Obi is set to leave Arsenal. I don't know how concrete this piece of news is, but Sham, I just want to like speak about a larger point, which is
Mhm.
the lack of a pathway in terms of youth players getting chances in the first team. Now, I will obviously make the argument that there's not too many youth players since Serge Gnabry that have left Arsenal and killed it elsewhere. But I still feel a bit annoyed when I see someone like an Omari Hutchinson leave the club for on a free, go to Chelsea, and then get sold for 15 million. It's almost as if we aren't maximizing value from our academy. Now, Per Mertesacker has said that the primary role of the academy is to serve the first team, whether it's in terms of producing players that play for the first team or in terms of us selling players and then reinvesting that in the first team. It seems to me that somewhere we have lost this whole sense of a pathway in terms of how youth players are managed. At times, they're not getting sent to the right loans. What do you think the solution is here, and what do you think has actually gone wrong? Because we were discussing it with some folks on a group chat yesterday, and we do feel that, yeah, it does seem a bit flawed to me how things have happened in recent seasons. So, what is your take on this?
Yeah, obviously we could be way better at that. With the Cheeto Obi Martin situation specifically, I think it's important to remember that unfortunately for English teams, you can't offer youth players contracts until they're 17 years old. Or sorry, you can't offer them professional contracts until they're 17 years old. Which, as if I remember correctly, um, he doesn't turn 17 until November. But
Mm-hmm.
so you have, I think Bayern Munich is the team that's in for him. I think Dortmund is also reportedly interested. So those teams can offer him a contract now. Whereas on our
Mm.
end, we're kind of trying to talk him into waiting until November, and then we'll offer him a contract. But it's it's really tricky right now because we're in a position where um, you can't you can't guarantee players a pathway into the first team, right? And that's the case normally, but especially now when we're trying to win the Premier League, when we're trying to win the Champions League, and we have quality up and down the roster. There isn't much of a pathway in. I think Ethan Winery is more than good enough to force his way in, and I honestly expect to see Winery play a decent number of minutes next season, like maybe 200-300 next season. Um, I honestly wonder if we don't sign a winger who can play on the right, if he might not establish himself as a rotation option for Saka at some point next season, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
Winery's fine, but then you have guys like a Mario Kojer Dubary, who at this point looks very likely that he'll leave, and you guys have guys like Cheeto Obi Martin, who that is an option for them to go. So I think the problem is we're not doing a good enough job of setting these players up to move on to first team football, right? I feel like a lot of what we're doing is just keeping these guys in the youth team, maybe sending a couple of them out on loan, but even then, the loans very often don't work, right? I think Ben Napper kind of struggled to find our previous loan manager. He's since left the club, but I think
Mm-hmm.
Ben Napper struggled to really identify situations that were beneficial for players to be loaned into. So we have to get better about that, and I think we have to get better about loaning these guys out and just like not holding on to them if an opportunity arises, to sell them on, right? Unless we're talking about game breaking talents, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Winery might be, like Miles Lewis Skelly might be, like Cheeto Obi Martin might be. Yeah, I think it's just all about setting these guys up for actual proper first team professional men's football experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, really just creating a pathway for them to either be a part of the Arsenal first team or to join another club and net us a profit. So we just have to get more efficient at doing that. And I think that involves identifying good loans for players, sending them to teams where they will play, right? Just look at Charlie
Mm-hmm.
Patino. We sent him to
Yeah.
Swansea and he barely played. And now, he's pretty much set to leave the club. Um, I mean, Omari Hutchinson was another situation where we just did not give him any pathway into the first team, and we let him leave for free. Arthur Okonkwo is also one that kind of annoys
Mm-hmm.
me, right? Because we loaned him to Wrexham, um, and he, I think, was one of the best players in League Two. I think he might have been the League Two player of the season, actually, I remember correctly. He helped them get promoted to League One, and now he's probably going to leave for free. And Ruel Walters probably going to leave for free. Amari Kozier Dewberry probably going to leave for free. That's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table from our youth academy. So I think we just have to get smarter about that. And I think also there is kind of this push that Arsenal are making to acquire youth talents. And now we have a transfer budget for that kind of thing. And so you see us now getting linked to, um, 14, 15-year-old players to sign and put into the academy.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. I think the club are aware of the problems and they're working to solve them. But yeah, it's just all about being more efficient.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also the point about loaning players at the right time. So I just looked at Cozier Dewberry, his profile. He's never been on loan anywhere, and he's 19, and he obviously looks an amazing talent. Looks to be like a Saka region. Obviously, he's not that good, but stylistically, he seems to be similar to Saka. Obviously, a really good talent. And it annoys me that he's not even been on a single loan and he's 19. Like, I feel like for his talent, he should have been sent on a loan before. And at least then he could have got a taste of like championship football and he could have come in. But yeah, right now it's like we're going to sell him. We might not get the best fee also when we're selling him because he obviously hasn't really had experience in the top flight. So that part is annoying. So I think it's important for us to like create that system again. And I know these things are easier said than done. Like if the club could do it, they probably would have done it. But yeah, I still think it's not a great look when Chelsea are able to get 15 million for Omari Hutchinson just like that. And we're just letting these guys go for nothing. So something for I guess the club to improve and think about because obviously every pound we get is important, and also for complying with all these profit sustainability rules, it's important that we also shift in a few and maximize value where we can. So I hope we see an improvement in that this window and also going forward. So let's see what happens.
Yep, for sure. And I think that's a mentality that we have to kind of fix in terms of sales of the senior players as well. That's probably a
Hmm.
topic for another day. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think the next step for the club generally is just to become more efficient with how we raise money from our players, both first team and youth academy, and yeah, we just really whittle down those margins and find advantages that we can really take that we can really extract value from and just get closer and closer and closer to those creme de la creme top teams.
Absolutely, no,
Yeah.
no question about that.
Yeah, but I think we will call it there for today because I know it's pretty late where you are. Um, but we will be back next week to talk about probably a couple of the Euros games, whatever news comes up. Then maybe we'll have a guest on to talk more about transfers. We'll see, but yeah, we'll see you in a week, and thank you so much for joining us and for being here with us to once again talk about Arsenal. I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. That's Sash. You can follow him on Twitter at LT Arsenal. You can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal on Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page. That's This Week in Arsenal. So if you're watching on YouTube, please do like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do give us that 5-star review. Really does help out for putting the pod out there for more people to find us. So again, thanks for being here with us, and we will talk to you next week. But until then, be a gooner, not a goon, and we will talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Right.